Hi everyone. Um, we are beginning this session. It is going to be recorded, so if for some reason you cannot be here today or whatever, I did a terrible job of promoting this one, which is okay. It's just been a busy season, and that is fine. But I wanted to still record this because it's really a fun, exciting thing to do this time of year is to start thinking about ways that we can be utilizing plants in our garden in combinations in these beautiful ways that really create a healthy ecosystem and less work on us as a gardener. You guys know that I love talking about companion planting, and it truly is a fun and exciting and helpful way for a home gardener to utilize the things that nature has given us to do the work that we're trying to do in our gardens, such as growing tomatoes, which we're going to talk about today. In the online community, there is a course that is coming out this month, and I'm finishing it up right now. And it is all about how to utilize companion planting on multi levels in your garden in a way that allows for your garden to thrive, to find a healthy balance of ecosystem and everything so that we can bring in beneficial insects, we can deter pests, we can deter disease, um, all of that. So that's what the course is all about. And today we are just going to be talking about one tiny little example of that, but I am going to give you a high level overview of what is companion planting and why we utilize it and why I love it. This design and what I'm going to walk through with you guys today is basically the first way that I ever played with companion planting. A lot of people try to do the Three Sisters garden design, which is the corn, squash, and beans. That is really traditional to the Native American people and how they actually domesticated those vegetables to be grown in a more just easier way for them so there was less foraging and things like that. I did a really great podcast series and all about the history of companion planting, how it came about. It's really fascinating. I love history. I love understanding plants and where they came from and how we got them into our garden today. And I kind of did like a deep dive on it. And so if you're geeky like that and it's interesting, I will link to it when I send out the replay so that you can check it out because I think it's like 30 minutes and I think it's just really fascinating to understand this method, just like any method. Now, there is differences between permaculture and what we know of permaculture and companion planting. It's similar, they're kind of in the same vein. Companion planting happens within permaculture. Permaculture is like a wider array of understanding an ecosystem. And so this is just how we basically put plants together next to each other to be beneficial to one another. And I like to make the comparison that it's sort of like a uh, it's like creating a wedding seating chart or something like that, or an event seating chart where you have all these different tables and you want to put people together that are going to enjoy themselves together, right? So we don't want to overpopulate in people that are going to not have a good time together. We'll just put it that way, right? So in the garden, we can do the same thing by utilizing companion planting to basically create this really healthy ecosystem where everybody's beneficial to one another. They're all helping and playing a part in maybe rebuilding soil or adding nitrogen or taking one thing and not another thing. In a traditional way that we have seen designs for gardens, it's usually in a monocrop sort of situation, or we're doing like one row and the seed packet says you can only have one every 4 inches. And so you're only able to plant so much. And so one of the reasons that we definitely love utilizing this is because for a home gardener in particular, it's much easier than on a farm. It just doesn't work the same way because of how systems have to work to make it productive on a larger scale. Even for a 1 acre farm, this wouldn't be as easy to utilize. There are some ways that you could, but it's definitely not as productive. So in a home gardener situation though, we can kind of utilize companion planting and add and do interplanting, utilizing the methods of companion planting to bring in more than we would normally be able to grow in a 4x8 bed or whatever it may be, your space that you're going to be growing. You can put more in one box, but that's not just the only benefit. I don't necessarily think that that's the only thing here. One, it's also beautiful. It's absolutely incredible to watch this thing erupt in color and texture and all the beneficial things that are happening. You will bring in more beneficial bugs and pollinators, and you will also bring in the other bugs, but the goal is that there's the good beneficial bugs coming in too that are basically creating this web of an ecosystem that we want in our gardens. Even if you have 2 or 3 raised beds, it's all you need in order to create something like this. And so, and many times a lot of these plants that we're adding in are really easy to grow. They're not complicated. It's just about understanding how they can like correlate with one another. In the community, we have a whole list. I went very deep on this extensive download that is every single plant, and I'll talk about some of it, where you have a core plant, and then we'll work from there. And I'm going to show you that today with tomatoes specifically, and how we can add in all these beneficial friends to them. Now back to like why we do this. So the other reason is that it lowers weeds. Because we're interplanting, there's less space for weeds to take and find their place in our garden. So as things grow and fill in, I typically find that once it really fills in, my weeds have no space to compete with everything. So it's pretty much like, oh, okay, well, weeding's less. We also have all these fresh herbs because many of the companions are going to be herbs. We have more edible flowers. We have all sorts of things that we may not have grown otherwise because we didn't think we could fit them in, but we actually can, and it's really, really great. I just love that it will increase your yields, it'll increase the health of your soil, it will lower the amount of work that you have to do as a gardener ultimately. So there's always questions, and through this whole process and in the community, we're going through and doing a Q&A at the end of the month. It's going to be really fun to kind of walk through and utilize these tools in our garden as we begin the process of planting and putting plants into the ground now that we're warming up in the Midwest and Northeast, where most of our community members are. So let's talk about tomatoes. So everybody struggles with growing tomatoes, or on some level. Maybe you get tomato hornworms, maybe you get blight, maybe you get, you struggle with blossom end rot. There's all these different things with tomatoes. They're kind of complicated to grow in terms of a plant, particularly a vegetable. And I have found that tomatoes are one of the most exciting vegetables to grow when we start thinking about utilizing them in a companion planting model, because they not only really show the benefit of working with this model, but they also just thrive in the environment. And all of a sudden we can have these plants that are struggling with issues go into a place where they're thriving and taste better and they're beautiful along with these other plants. And what's also really cool with companion planting in this, particularly in this situation, is that most of the things that grow together go together on our plates. And so in this design, all these foods can be eaten together, which is really exciting to be growing this one box that is feeding everything for you, like in one 4x8. And that's the design I'm going to work off of today. It's just a 4x8 bed because most people traditionally build a 4x8. Now, if yours is different, you know, you can kind of change that. And if you're just coming in, we are going to have a replay so you can catch the beginning where I talk about what and why we do companion planting and more. But I am going to share my screen. I have a raised bed box that I'm doing like a little whiteboard because I think it's the best way to show how these plants go in. Because with companion planting, there's timing. We do not typically plant all these things at once. The other main question that I get is about watering all these things. Everything needs different watering levels, right? Well, yes and no. The beautiful thing about a companion planted box is that the plants are going to give and take what they want and need. And so I usually stick to that rule of thumb where you get an inch of water a week in your garden beds once all the plants are established. I think that if you're not getting that, it needs to be 1 or even 2, depending on what your plants are showing you they need, and depending on the heat and all these things, you need to do 1 to 2 solid, really deep soaks a day or a week, sorry, or else they're probably not getting enough water. But if you have too much water, that's also a problem. And there's a class that I'm going to be doing, I think it's in June. We were talking about some normal disease and pest issues, and that's one of them. So if you have questions, you can always let me know, whether it's a DM or whatever. I would love to help you in any way possible. So I'm going to share my screen and this whiteboard. Let's see. Here's this. Okay, here we go. So I have this raised bed box, and what we're going to do is this box is a general like 4x8. It's not exactly measured, but you guys are going to get the concept, and that's the main thing. So everything has a different timing, and I'm going to go through it. The plants that we are going to be putting in here are borage, which if you don't know what borage is, it's this like big spiky looking plant. It is spiky, but as it grows, it's very easy to grow, and it tastes like cucumbers. You can eat the leaves, you can eat the flowers. The flowers are blue, they're beautiful, and they literally taste like cucumbers. It's wild. It's a very beautiful plant, especially when there's dew on it and the sun's coming in. I love it, but it really needs space to flow over. Then we're going to be doing beans. Beans are wonderful in this model because let me go back to borage. Borage, reason why we have it is because 1, it makes the flavor of your tomatoes better. 2, it will also deter hornworms. It's like the kryptonite to hornworms. And so I really suggest having 1 to 2. And it's really important with this model that you interplant these things. And that's why I want to show you guys this today. And so that's the other reason we have borage in there. Plus, it's just a beautiful plant. But then beans are really important because they're going to add nitrogen back into the soil, which is really important because we have these super heavy feeders, which are tomatoes, and we're also going to have alliums here in a minute that I'm going to talk about. But those are all heavy feeders, and beans are heavy, like they're feeders in general, but they're not as heavy as tomatoes. And so, but what they do is at the end of the season, they help to rebuild that soil. And they can grow with tomatoes so well, like vining up them and everything, without hindering the production of either. So they make really good buddies in the garden. Then we have lettuces, which will act like a mulch, sort of, to cover the root system of the tomatoes, to allow water to stay down in the soil. And the tomatoes will act as a canopy to keep the lettuces cool through the hot summers. And then we have marigolds, which marigolds are great pest deterrents. If you have squirrels, rabbits that want to eat your tomatoes, these are going to be really great. When we cut them at the end of the season, we like to cut them at the top of the soil because they also add in beneficial nematodes back into the soil, which will help keep out maggots and like other not so good things in our soil. So they're really good at rebuilding the soil at the end of the season as well. Next is basil. Any variety, but I suggest in this situation globe or traditional Italian basil is what you're going to probably want here, but I've grown every type of basil with my tomatoes. Basil's really good as a pest deterrent, but then it also complements the flavor of the tomatoes and actually makes them taste better, and vice versa. They really, really love each other, both on your plate and in the garden. So they grow great together. Then we have carrots. Carrots are going to open up the root system, aerate the soil, and allow the tomatoes to uptake the nutrients that they need from the soil while not taking any nutrients that the tomatoes want, or too many of those nutrients. And so it really helps open up the soil and allow the tomatoes to develop the deep, deep root system that they need in order to uptake the important nutrients like calcium and all of that, which if we don't have enough calcium in the water or in the soil, or the tomato can't get the calcium because it's a very heavy mineral, then or nutrient, that it will create blossom end rot. So it's really important that we help the soil be as positive for the tomato plants as possible. And then we're going to have alliums. Alliums, once again, are a really good pest deterrent. Some people don't like to pair them because of how heavy they are in feeding. We are doing a fertilizing class in June, and it is going to be really helpful because in this situation, I don't worry about that. With proper fertilization in an organic way, watching your plants and paying attention, you can grow these within the same bed and it's not an issue. So I actually plant my garlic knowing that's where my tomatoes will be, and I also plant it knowing it will act as a protector for my brassicas in the spring, because it's one of the only things that we can really utilize in the spring months to help deter green cabbage moth, or like those little green worms that just inundate our brassicas, because that's all they can eat early in the season. So that's what we're going to be adding. And here in, of course, tomatoes. So whenever we're talking about the design with companion planting, we want to choose a core plant. And in the companion planting chart that I have, there's a list of all the core plants, and then the plants that are their best partners, and the plants we don't want with them. For tomatoes, the main one that you want to avoid are other nightshades, because when we mix too many nightshades together, those would be your eggplants, your peppers, your potatoes. All of those are going to have the same pests, same issues, all of those things. We don't want them together. Even if you are like, well, I'm going to put, it's better to put 1 or 2 tomatoes in a box, or 3 tomatoes in a box, depending on the varieties you're using, than it is to add in a pepper or add an eggplant or potatoes in there. Just trust me on this, you will have way less pest issues. And so that is the main thing. The other thing is, you never want to, if you grew your kale in the spring and then in June you're adding in your tomatoes, and like almost right away, and they're still growing there, what the kale left over, or the broccoli, or whatever it is, it's a brassica, it will deter the growth of your tomatoes. So this is where companion planting is also really helpful to help us figure out rotations, because, and I know this is very complicated, that's next level stuff, but it will help you understand that. So we never want, and then we particularly don't want to be growing them together in the same time, same season, all of that next to each other, because you will literally tell the difference between your tomatoes and kale that are growing with each other and the ones that are growing separate from each other. And it makes a significant difference. And yeah, just don't put your kale with your cucumbers or your beans or something like that. It will do way better. Yeah, you get it. So I'll leave time at the end here for questions. So if you have them, you can just drop them in the chat as I am going through this. And then I'll answer them at the end if you guys have any. So we're going to start adding these. I'm going to add in the tomatoes first and then show you how I add in everything else. And then I'll go through and talk about timing afterwards. Okay. So I'm just going to add these in. So these are going to be our tomatoes. They're going to take up the most amount of space. And in this case, I'm adding in 2 tomatoes. We'll just say that these would be 2 heirloom varieties that are indeterminate. You can grow 2 of them in 1 box, and I would do a Florida weave method, which is where you have a stake, 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 and then you weave the string through it, and you make sure that you prune it down to 2 liters, and then you'll have plenty of, and you can take off the suckers. I like to take off suckers the first 2 feet of the plant, and then after that I kind of let it go. And especially because our growing season's a little slow or short, so it can be really hard. Okay, so I'm gonna put these in color so you guys can see that they're red. And then we'll add in the carrots, and we're gonna put carrots right between, like this, and we'll make those orange. And then I'm going to, honestly, you could just run them to the edge. And the reason I'm doing like 2 dots there is because the carrots, though they're going to, you'll see that some of this will overlap, but the carrots are gonna bush with their, so that's the amount of space, even though it's technically 1 row, the amount of bushing it will do, we have to compensate for in the design. So those are the carrots. Then we'll add in the lettuces. So lettuce, you could go 1 of 2 ways. In this design, you can go like this, and I'm doing this super rough, you guys, so I'm not taking up a ton of time doing it. but I think it's helpful to see in real time. So those are your lettuces. I'm going to have to get a new green for all the other green things. But now I'm going to add in the borage, and borage is going to stay blue. And the idea here, I like to put it on the corners or on the edge or somewhere like that, and it will take up some space with the lettuces. And I like to do 2 of them at least, but in an ideal world, you have a couple. You could also grow nasturtium in here. It's always beneficial. And once again, it's going to lead down the edges of your raised bed, or it's just going to lead out from your in-ground bed. So, but we'll just put 4 borage in here because I really like how they fill in. Now we're going to do marigolds, and we'll do quite a few of them. And they're going to be, you're going to see that we're going to like interplant these. And I'm just going to do, because now we're going to get into and how we're interplanting them. The other way you could do the lettuces is you could run the lettuces in here because they're like over the top if you wanted. You don't have to. And my perfectionism is not being hit right now, but that's okay. So I like to do this. And then, so that's not, I'm just doing like every other one as like a strong example here. So we'll go yellow, those are the marigolds. Then these would be the basil. Do a different green. And then, and at the end of this, I will, with the replay, I'll have the names on this and I will send this to you so you can have it. And maybe I'll perfect it and make it a little prettier because that's me. So then I would do, you could do 1 or 2 things here. I like to do onions on the end. You could do onions, you could do your garlic, either one. I like to do that. And you're probably like, where in the, are you putting the beans? That's a great question. Because those guys trail upwards. So we'll put the onions in gray. You could do a couple things here. If you put the lettuces through here, like I was saying, which it would kind of be overlapping in this situation, underneath the carrots and the tomato canopy, you could put the like 3 or 4 bean plants on either side. In fact, let's just do that. I kind of like that. I do this different every time. It's like a different puzzle, and I kind of love that. Okay, so then these could be your beans. And we'll do them in pink, because that's fun. Okay, so like I said, I'll make this prettier, send it to you guys so you can see it. But I'm going to talk about timing really quick. I see there's one question and comment, but this is the basic design. Now, I love this because for a couple reasons. I love to apply a lot of the knowledge that I have from being a designer and from my art, my art degree and things like that, from an aesthetic perspective. And I love to think about that here. And when you think about this, it would basically be like a beautiful triangle. And I love to lead the eye to the center of something and then have it create a conversation as it moves down. This is how we create great art. This is how we create beautiful spaces that we design. And I have no formal training in landscape design, but I'm just utilizing what I know from my art degree and my design degree to bring those elements into the garden. And so with this, we're going to have these beans and tomatoes like trailing down, and the borage is going to be there, and all these other things are lower around, and they're going to create that aesthetic that is going to be really beautiful in August. So it's going to be really awesome. Now, if you are interested, there is in the beginner gardener course, I actually have a full beginner garden that is planned specifically for companion planting. So it's like no brainer. I give you all the timings, everything. That was my goal. But with this, I'll just go through the timing for this box specifically really quick. So first of all, what we'd be putting in are our carrots and our onions and our borage. Marigolds would be there soon after. But carrots are going to be number one. We put those in way before anything. Like, this is a great time of year to be seeding carrots. And we want to get those going because by the time they're really sprouting and starting to show their green is when the tomatoes and a lot of other things are going to be going in that will be shading them. And they need that early sun to get going. And then they're going to want the shade of the tomato plant. But they're also starting to aerate the soil for the tomato to come in. So next, we're going to be adding in our bean seeds, our lettuce seeds. All those things are being direct seeded along with our marigold starts going in. Marigolds are pretty frost hardy, like semi-frost hardy, so they're not going to take a snow, but they can take, some like 35, 40 degree nights, and they're going to be just fine. You can also do calendula in this situation as well. If you want to mix it up a little bit, some other colors and textures, you can absolutely do that. I would do the smaller variety of marigolds in this situation, not the larger ones as well. And then your beans, about the time that your beans are sprouting is when your tomatoes and your basil go in. These are going to go in last and at the exact same time because they are summer plants. These are warm weather plants that they should never go out, neither one of them. They should never go out if the temperatures are below 45. Like 45 is there, like, we're probably going to be stressed and I'm not going to produce for you very well and I'm going to struggle with disease and all of that stuff. So you really, 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 really have to wait. And sometimes the best thing is to watch the 2-week forecast and know that it's consistently above 45 as a low. If it is that, then you can go for it. And the soil needs to feel like it's when you stick your finger in, it feels like a sauna. And if it doesn't, then you got to wait and hold that plant until then. So that's how you actually plant it, and that is the basics of putting this together. So I see that there's 2 questions and we have a few more minutes. So yes, so the box here is I'm going to move, well, I can leave it here. The box is 4 by 8 in this situation. So it's not exactly measured, but that's the concept. So it's because I don't know if there'd be the exact amount of these plants in there, but we're just going off of a rough idea. You can kind of get the idea here. Erin, yes, I know it seems like a lot of plants, but I promise you it's not. I mean, in this situation, you probably have 2 sets of onions going in. You probably have 8 bean plants going in, 2 tomato plants, a row of seeded carrots, but it's all about timing. If everything has its time, then direct seeding these things and thinning, obviously, when you're direct seeding something is what you should do. But giving the borage that space to just like flow over is key. And getting those stakes in early on before you even put the onions in, then you know where to put the onions. Do not use tomato cages. It will not serve you. So that's my suggestion. Do you guys have any other questions before I close this up? If not, I'm hoping this was really helpful. I know that it's probably really overwhelming and I'm going to perfect this little design and send it off tomorrow. You'll get the email tomorrow. So, but I feel like it's perfect timing because right now is the right time to be seeding carrots and all these things. And soon enough, before we know it, tomatoes will be ready to go in the ground. So, but it sounds like you guys may not have any more questions. So thank you guys so much for coming today. And I will send along the replay with this design. And if you're interested in taking the beginner garden course, it is available in the community, and we're going to be releasing our companion planting course as well. So, I'm so glad you saw it last minute. I know it's terrible at promoting it, and I'm glad it's helpful. We teach everything so much more in depth in the community, so if you're ever interested. But I'm glad to offer these free classes to get you guys inspired and going. So, if you have any questions, you can always email me or DM me. I would be happy to chat. Okay, you guys have a great day. Thanks for being here.